Good evening, we are Group 7. I am Destiny, and Yo-Yo is my groupmate. Today we are going to share you about peer influences on risky behaviors. This is our table of content. First, I'll talk about the definitions, theories and related study findings, relationships between peers' influences and risky behaviors. Then Yo-Yo will tell you about factors that contribute to the extent of influences, role of family, schools, and government in preventing negative peer influences, and our conclusion. We begin our lives in the social world of our family. Then, as we grow up, being more mature and obtaining autonomy, we deal with neighborhoods and go to school. We spend more time interacting with people who are at the same age as us. Psychologists refer to people who are born around the same time as age mates, or peers. Because they mature on similar timetables, peer possess many of the same interests and skills and often have comparable experiences as they grow up. And the influence exerted by the peer group or its individual members to fit in with or conform to the group norms and expectations. Peer pressure may have positive socialization value, but may also have negative consequences for mental or psychological health. The first theory that we would like to share is Eric Erson's 8 stages of psychosocial development. According to this theory, the main and most important developmental tasks for adolescents are to solve the identity versus role confusion crisis. They have to construct their own unique sense of identity and find the social environment where they can belong to and create meaningful relationships with other people. Both the high quality and satisfying relationships with others and the formed sense of identity are associated with better adolescents' mental health and psychological well-being. A positively solved identity versus role confusion crisis enables a person to integrate self-perception images into a stable personal identity, as well as strengthen performance of different roles and assumed commitments. During this stage, adolescents are taught to consider for the first time, who am I, who do I want to be, and who does society expect me to be? This search for identity often involves exploring extremes and testing limits before choosing a life path. Delinquent and self-destructive tendencies are seen as possible, and many even natural aspects of the journey. Erickson goes on to discuss the need for youth to find stable relationships outside those with their families, a concept he labels fidelity, which is the ability to sustain loyalties freely pledged in spite of the inevitable contradictions of value systems. Adaptive development in the form of fidelity emerges as feelings of attachment towards society and as an individual express behaviors that confirm his or her commitment both to individuals and the institutions in society. Meeting the potentially new and increasing demands from society for young people to define themselves prompts youth to begin to examine their beliefs and values and in turn provides opportunities for youth to commit to a set of values and to social institutions, for example, to uphold the behaviors that are socially acceptable. Therefore, concepts such as loyalty and commitment to choice, people, and beliefs are at the heart of the fidelity. Conformity to peer influence in adolescence is motivated by their search for identity. Those questions they ask themselves about who they want to be provides motivation for wide experiences, and the search for fidelity leads adolescents to look to others. Studies find that adolescents, especially those in middle adolescence, are very open and susceptible to involvement in antisocial behaviors. One possible rationale behind this is that youth are motivated to explore varied experiences through others in order to define their identity. If adolescents are unable to resist peer pressure and negative influences, they may be more prone to delinquent behavior or use of psychoactive substances. Adolescents may seek to conform to behavioral norms of the peer group with which they identify themselves with. Research has shown that adolescents' identity development is related to their relationships with peers. Good and supporting relationships with peers is positively related to adolescents' identity development because it can help prevent stagnation in the process of identity exploration. A peer group not only provides emotional support for adolescents but also provides a social status necessary for his or her identity development. More in adolescence, a self-comparison with peers becomes more important when adolescents try to associate their identities with their peers. Members of the peer group can model their behavior according to the group norms, therefore, peer groups can have significant impact on adolescents' development. Next, social learning theory. It's proposed by Albert Bandura, emphasizes the importance of observing, modeling, and imitating the behaviors, attitudes, and emotional reactions of others. It considers how both environmental and cognitive factors interact to influence human learning and behavior. Social learning theory acknowledges the interaction that occurs between an individual and his or her environment. The outside environment is where a person can observe an action, understand its consequences, and become motivated to repeat it and adopt it. Behavior is affected by structural factors such as service availability and policies, as well as by social factors such as social norms and peer influence. According to this approach, behavior is learned from the environment through the process of observational learning. In society, adolescents are surrounded by many influential models, such as parents within the family, characters on TV, friends within their peer groups, and teachers at school. These models provide examples of behavior to observe and imitate. Teenagers pay attention to some of these people who are the models and encode their behavior. At a later time, they may imitate the behavior they have observed. Then, self-determination theory is a theory of human motivation based on three basic psychological needs: autonomy, relatedness, and competence. The theory suggests that psychological well-being and development are dependent upon these three needs being met. Therefore, as humans, we are motivated to work towards satisfying these needs. In this discussion around peer influence, there are two needs in particular which are seen as especially important. The first is relatedness, that is, the need to feel connected and close to another. According to this theory, humans are motivated to satisfy this need. This provides a viable explanation for the motivational power of peer influence in that, as humans, we desire to feel related to others, and this motivates us to behave in ways that are consistent with those around us. As a result, we can foster peer relations and satisfy the innate need for relatedness. The second need that is particularly relevant to peer influence is that of autonomy. Well, this may at first seem counterintuitive. It is in fact the motivation to achieve autonomy from parental influence that may lead an individual to be more susceptible to peer influence. Therefore, the motivational power of peer influence may stem from the adolescent's need for autonomy from parental influence. A long tradition of research in developmental psychology points to adolescents' peer groups as important contributors to trajectories of risk-taking behavior. One of the strongest predictors of deviant behavior in adolescence is affiliation with deviant peers. And this relationship is particularly strong for adolescent substance use and abuse. Crime statistics also indicate that adolescents typically commit crimes ranging from vandalism and drug use to homicide in peer groups, whereas adults typically do so alone. Furthermore, adolescents are at greater risk of being involved in an automobile accident when riding in a car with multiple adolescent passengers. Here are some insights about the relationship between peer influence and risky behavior. Friendship quality appears to influence adolescents' engagement in risky behavior. Most researchers envision friendship quality as a multidimensional construct, encompassing companionship, intimacy, support, and conflict. Often, relationships with high levels of support are said to be of positive quality, while those characterized by high levels of conflict are said to be of negative quality. Researchers have posited that risky behaviors occur because adolescents are trying to overcome or lessen their negative feelings resulting from high peer conflict and low intimacy. The relationship between peer support and risky behavior depends upon the type of friends with which one associates. Engagement in risky behavior differs for adolescents who associate with deviant peers relative to those who do not. For example, having positive quality friendships with delinquent peers is associated with increases in delinquency, while the effect is attenuated in positive quality friendships with non-delinquent peers. Typically, youth with friends who engage in delinquency, drink alcohol, or use drugs are more likely to engage in those types of behaviors themselves. Other factors add even more complexity to this relationship. For instance, an adolescent's perception of peers' deviancy, regardless of their actual deviancy, has been shown to better predict the adolescent's own risky behavior. Youth may actually overestimate the deviancy of their peers and try to seek favor with them by emulating behaviors believed to be valued by the group. So, what about those adolescents who appear to be friendless and engage in risky behaviors? Social rejection is associated with increased internalizing and externalizing behaviors, both of which may be coping mechanisms that lead to risky behavior during adolescence. Rejected adolescents may engage in risky behavior for multiple reasons, including a desire to gain recognition from peers and attempting to establish a nonconforming identity. Importantly, importantly, characteristics of rejected individuals, like their susceptibility to peer influence, can impact the strength of the relationship between social exclusion and subsequent engagement in risky behavior.
To conclude and expand on problem behavior theories, about the factors that influence problem behaviors, there are protective factors which prevent adolescents from problem behaviors and risk factors which encourage adolescents to adopt problem behaviors. Regarding protection, models include measures of positive role models, such as friends' involvement in community groups and services. Controls include individual level measures of control, such as their attitude and intolerance of deviance, and support includes measures of contextual supports, such as family closeness. With regard to risk, models include measures of negative role models such as peers' alcohol use. Opportunity includes readiness measures such as availability of alcohol at home, and vulnerability includes measures of personal vulnerability, such as perceived stress and low self esteem. The first one is friends' models of conventional behavior, for example, involvement in various conventional organizations and pro social pastimes, good grades at school, regular church attendance. These are the qualities that exert interpersonal control. Having a positive orientation towards health constitutes protection against involvement in risk behaviors that can be damaging to health, such as substance use or risky driving practices. It reflects a commitment to behaviors that promote healthy outcomes and that discourage health compromising behaviors. A positive orientation towards school represents positive engagement with a conventional social institution and commitment. Adolescents can more successfully create a strong personal identity through dedication and commitment to the academic institution and do not feel the need to seek out alternative or superficial ways of affirming adulthood or feeling successful. Religiosity emphasizes the values of universalism, benevolence, tradition, and conformity. Moreover, religiosity reflects a commitment to conventional values and disapproval of norm-violative activities and serves as a personal control against involvement in non-normative behaviors. Intolerance of deviance reflects a commitment to conventional values and disapproval of antisocial behavior and non-violative activities. Adolescents with high levels of deviant disapproval strongly identify with the values shared by the society. Individuals' perception of their self-regulatory abilities, commonly called self-efficacy beliefs, serves as a regulatory function in all major transitions of life, and they are especially important during adolescence. In particular, regulatory self-efficacy constitutes protection because it increases the likelihood that adolescents will be able to resist peer pressure. Talking about risk factors, prior research on adolescent substance use has frequently examined main effects of family functioning, or the relative contributions of family and peer influences. Multiple aspects of family functioning have been explored, such as parent substance use, parental monitoring, family support and cohesion, and parent adolescent communication, providing supports for a linkage between each domain of family functioning and adolescent substance use. A second important risk factor for consideration in both multiplicative and addictive risk factor model is adolescents' perceptions of overall social acceptance. Teens' overall peer status, as well as behavioral characteristics of their close friends, uniquely and significantly contributes to psychological adjustments. For instance, low peer status and adolescent defiant peer affiliation are age-unique predictors of risk behavior. Adolescents' perceived peer rejection has also been associated with depression, substance use, and suicidality. A combination of low social acceptance and adolescents' affiliation with risky peers will be associated with an increased risk for health risk behaviors. Last, the model also considered the role of depression symptoms. At a universal level, depression and negative effect have been linked to cigarette and heavy alcohol use, aggression, and suicidality. Depressive symptoms would similarly moderate the association between peers and adolescent substance use, violent behaviors, and suicidality, and also contribute to a cumulative risk factor model. Participating in alcohol use, sexual intercourse, and teen dating violence had a positive association with violence victimization. Poor academic performance, increased depression and suicide rates, poor overall health, lack of social and peer acceptance, and participating in risky health and sexual behaviors are more likely to occur when someone is a victim of teen dating violence. It signifies how negative intimate relationships exert influences as a vicious cycle. In addition to the link between teens' victimization and other health risks, research has also shown that victimization rates differ based on demographic variables. Adolescents who do not conform with the social norms concerning physical appearance, gender, and sexuality are at a higher risk to be rejected by their peers, bullied, and victimized. Those adolescents experiencing higher rates of sexual dating violence include females, racial and ethnic minorities, and members of the LGBT community. To reduce negative peer influences, families in which there are high levels of conflicts and low positive family relations are more likely to develop a social context that includes inadequate parental monitoring and association with deviant peers. Poor parental monitoring and associations with deviant behaviors are associated with subsequent engagement in problem behavior. There are several approaches that parents can use to more effectively manage teens' peers relationships. For younger adolescents, parents might design the environment to provide safe activities that focus on young teens' need for sensation seeking. For example, adult supervised outdoor activities with peers such as rock climbing, surfing, and zip lining can provide a great context for the excitements and social relationships needed for young teens. Secondly, supervising teens' interaction with peers and provide rules for peer interaction can limit opportunities for risky behaviors. Parents also should know and seriously teach them laws and regulations regarding risky behaviors, most importantly, the consequences that they will be facing after all. Fourthly, for older adolescents, parents can consult with teens about peers. Consulting can build on teens' growing ability to self-regulate and encourage them to identify and develop strategies for navigating peer situations where the risky activities is likely to occur. By developing a nonviolent communication with them, parents can understand the acts of children by listening to their feelings and needs, so that they could feel supported and have a higher willingness to talk about their problems and needs in front of their parents. Communication which involves only blaming and judging can lead to high level of household stress, which can cause family dysfunction and parents-teens interaction that appear lacking in warmth or involvement. For the schools and government, intervention efforts must focus on improving parenting practices and increasing parental monitoring. There are research evidence that these goals might be reached through the provision of parent training programs, school-based communication to parents, and target media on specific parenting practices, such as parental monitoring. Programs should expand their scope to include strategies that foster and strengthen parents-adolescents relationship. Family relationships is a really important factor that influences individual and thus the peer influences involved. In effective parenting practices, at especially age below 10, places the child on a trajectory that eventually results in antisocial and delinquent behavior. This suggests that training for the parents of high-risk children at a much earlier age may be a more desirable approach. There could be significant reduction in antisocial behavior using parent training programs based on this approach. Thus, an integrated prevention effort that strengthens parental practices, monitoring norms in a community, and childhood social skills early on in the developmental process may provide a powerful, cost effective set of prevention procedures. The good news is that adolescents were most likely to report affiliations with friends who engage in prosocial behaviors. The bad news is that adolescents also indicated a substantial proportion of their friends engage in substance use and deviant behaviors. These results suggest that most adolescents are exposed to both adaptive and maladaptive sources of influence and thus receive conflicting messages of reinforcement within their peer group. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, healthy living and having friends involved in conventional behaviors promote opposition to risk behaviors in the presence of deviant peers, even after controlling for higher levels of risk behavior. We can't control the environment around our children as what they were exposed to. Therefore, in contrast to the ambitious goal of eliminating adolescents' affiliation with deviant peers and closing them inside the boxes of comfort and safety, primary prevention efforts may be most successful in identifying factors that lead these multiply influence adolescents to refrain from risk behavior themselves. This was also found that religiosity, which promotes positive attitude and fulfillment of the spiritual self, is an important protective factor against risk behaviors in middle adolescence, which implies that internal strength of individual is a crucial factor for healthy personal development. So, this is the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening. And here are the references that we have used.